Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first comment deals with drilling in the Commonwealth, and the thing that I wanted to point out is the distinct difference between the large Marcellus Shale operations and the small producer in the Commonwealth. And, you know, I think a lot of people, even in this building, don't realize that we've been drilling in this Commonwealth for many, many, many years. And I come from the northern tier. In McKean County, we've been drilling oil wells for 100 years. And I think that gets lost on some people, and they don't realize that when we're formulating policy, formulating legislation and regulations, that oftentimes, and what I've seen in this building is the fact that the large operations, the regulations, the legislation is being patterned toward those large operations and has an effect on the small producer at the same time. So I guess in the form of a comment, I would caution and urge everyone to take a look at that, because I'm concerned about the effects that it will have on the small producer. And I know that there are people inside your department. I know that you're aware of it, but sometimes it gets lost in the whole discussion. And you know, there's been a lot of comment in this building about the closing of the oil refineries in Philadelphia. Well, I've got an oil refinery in Bradford that's very important to our region that uses Pennsylvania grade crude oil, and actually this refinery is struggling to get crude right now. They can't find enough crude to adequately supply that refinery. And I'm just concerned about the effects that policies we put in place here have on the small producer that's actually out there producing this crude oil, and the trickle-down effect that it really has. There are nearly 400 employees at that oil refinery in Bradford. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to raise this issue so that as we're considering policy, as we're considering legislation, we need to think about those small producers and the effect that those policies have on those small producers. And I'd certainly welcome any of your comments in that regard.
Well, it's a good point. It's an interesting point. We do need to be, and I need to be, mindful of that and pay attention to it. And I don't know the specifics of the Bradford oil refinery and how it compares with what's going on at the southeastern oil refineries and so forth. I would caution against going the other way. We don't want to create a plan A of environmental protection for small people that isn't up to par because they're small people, and a plan B for environmental protection for the big people because they're big people. Now, that being said, we have to be wary of make sure that what we're doing makes sense across the board. And I think that's really what you're driving at.
Well, I mean, I support adequate environmental protections, absolutely. But what I'm saying is they're completely different circumstances, and we want to make sure that there are environmental protections in place. But when we pass legislation, sometimes we lump the small guy in with the big guy, and it's not a level playing field. I mean, there were some things in 1950 that we were trying to differentiate very clearly that only apply to unconventional wells, and it was a struggle, to be honest with you, because some of those stipulations, you know, could be construed to be applied to conventional wells, and we've got to be careful that we don't run the conventional well operators, the small operators, out of business, and then that trickles down to hurt a refinery like is in my area. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Understood.
And I'm not standing here today saying that the oil refinery in my area is going to go out of business, but I'm saying that, you know, the trickle-down effect and the effect that it can have it could be very detrimental down the road. Okay. So I would urge you to think about that as we move forward.